deserves an award for courage more than Margaret. She shows nothing but courage in facing the adversity that's in front of her. It is courage that drives her. It's determination that drives her.
My name is Margaret Carfora. I'm 35 years old, and I was diagnosed in July of 1983 when I was 3 months old.
She was only 3 months old, and I took her for the sweat test. And they told me then and there that it was CF. So I came home, and I knew nothing about CF at all, and we were just beside ourselves. The following Tuesday, we went to the doctor, to the pediatrician, and he told me that my daughter was going to die. By the time she was 5, she was going to die.
It's a grueling routine for cystic fibrosis. It's every day, the nebulizers that take time, the chest physiotherapy that takes time. Since I was so young and couldn't do any of that for myself, they would have to pound on my back in order to shake the mucus off of my lungs.
For all her life, we always did 3 treatments. We didn't try to miss it no matter what. Mm-hmm. We felt it was our responsibility to help her.
But it was really as I got older and there was more damage happening to my lungs with all the inflammation and all the scarring that it literally felt sometimes like you're just drowning. It felt like breathing through like a coffee straw. You know, the goal for me was to always go to college. It felt pretty good the first 2 years, but it was after my sophomore year that things got really dicey.
She got really sick. The week was touch and go. We thought we were going to lose her.
You know, we put in a PICC line, and then I just started running these high fevers. I was on oxygen full time from that point, and my doctors came in, and that's when we talked about needing a lung transplant. And I started my 3-day transplant evaluation at UPenn. The fluid in my body just wasn't clearing. So my knees were swollen, my ankles were swollen, and that's very painful when you go to walk up and down the stairs, coupled with the fact that I can barely breathe. I lived in the sorority house with 22 of my closest friends, and they were really integral in getting me through that semester.
You know, I heard a story later that people would carry her up and down the stairs at school. She never told us, no.
It kind of dawned on me that I just didn't have 2 years to live, and we need to make a decision. And that was probably one of the hardest phone calls I had to make to my parents, to say, we need to do something and we need to do it now. We all just started doing research on other centers to try to find someplace else to go that had a shorter wait time. And ultimately we ended up finding Ochsner Medical Center down in New Orleans. So we left for New Orleans in June of 2004, and we had just, you know, rented a hotel room for like a couple of days. And then they called me and said, you're on the list and you can't go home, so find an apartment. And we were like, okay. I waited for 5 months for the call for the transplant. And when the phone rang at 7:30 in the morning and they're like, it's time. And I remember at that point just feeling very calm. The doctors came in and said it's a go. And I just remember sitting there with my mom and sister being like, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. I don't remember anything until I woke up the next day, and that first breath was unbelievable.
And she looks at me, she goes, Daddy, now I can breathe. It felt like a little straw, and now I can finally breathe. That was it.
I hadn't climbed a flight of stairs, I think, in 4 months. So I started doing that. I started going to the hall. I remember my dad standing behind me and just like us walking up and down the stairs. And 9 days after my transplant, they let me go back to the apartment and I was discharged. I wouldn't have been successful without their help, without their love, and without them being by my side. They helped me fight, and that's what I needed. I needed help to fight because I needed to survive.
She was totally different.
It was incredible. It was everything that I'd ever wanted. I didn't have this like laundry list of like crazy things that I wanted to do after transplant. I really just wanted to be able to graduate college and start my life. Then in December of 2008, I met Jimmy, which was very exciting. Didn't really know where it was gonna go, but we decided to just, you know, start dating each other. And I told him about CF and about transplant, and he didn't really seemed fazed by it at all. And he was just kind of like, okay, like that's part of who you are. So where do you want to go eat?
It didn't scare me, but it's because of the way she deals with it that it didn't deter me.
Everything was taking off. I had gotten a new job at a different company. My career was really excelling. And I decided to start training for a marathon, half marathon on top of all of that.
The half marathon was one of the best days we've had. It took her over 3 hours. She did it really well. She paced herself. And then when I saw her come down, a couple of us jumped in to help her through.
I remember her crossing the finish line, and everybody cried. Everybody cried, because it was like such an achievement for somebody who couldn't walk up a flight of stairs before her transplant. To be able to now run 13.1 miles. All her friends cross the finish line with her. It was an exciting day. It was really emotional. Like, that was the first time I really understood the impact of what she had been through in her life.
I was 5 years out of my transplant at that point, and probably in the best shape that I'd ever been in my entire life. And then I started to have a pain in my chest.
She literally couldn't swallow anything. She couldn't, not even water. Like, she couldn't swallow anything. Everything hurt so much.
So she had to go in for an endoscopy, and they told us it was cancer.
He said, you have post-transplant lymphoproliferative disorder. So it's basically a B-cell lymphoma, and there was a tumor that had wrapped itself around my esophagus. So every time I swallowed, that was the pain that I was feeling. And I was very lucky that I had the PTLD where I did, because we caught it so early, because the doctor said it's very aggressive, it's malignant, and it will kill you. So, and this needs to be treated right away. I had to do 4 rounds of this medication that's 1 step below chemo, which obviously they wanted to start there before they put me on full chemotherapy. And it worked. And in 4 rounds of this medication, the tumor was gone. So I called Jimmy and I had him come over. And at that point, like, we didn't really know where our relationship was gonna go.
She was like, look, this one's treatable, but this is something that could come up again, or I could get something worse. Almost without hesitating, I told her, look, I think by now you know I love you, and I'm not going anywhere.
And I was like, played it so cool. I was like, yeah, I know. And inside I'm like, oh my God, he loves me.
Our relationship grew from there. We got stronger.
And then he proposed in March of 2012.
And then we got married in November of 2013. It was a big wedding. We had a lot of fun. After we got married, we decided we did want to pursue having children. She had consulted with her doctors, and I was adamant that she wasn't going to be the one that carried the kids because it was going to be too great a health risk. She consulted with the doctors. They agreed.
I was looking for a surrogate. It was also my 10-year transplant anniversary. We went to New Orleans. We had just this big celebration of life. As we started ending 2014 into 2015, that's when I started getting some odd results out of some testing from my gynecologist. And we did some further testing, and that's in probably February, I was definitively diagnosed with cervical cancer. When every time you get diagnosed with something, right, you kind of look at the 5-year survival rate. And it's like I was looking at the 5-year survival rate after PTLD, then the 5-year survival rate after cervical cancer. It was just like, how many more odds am I gonna have to beat? But then I have this wonderful life that I'm living, so I take all of that stuff and I tuck it away so that I can enjoy my life. I got officially a clean bill of health from the cervical cancer in January of 2016. My agency found me a surrogate, so things were moving forward very nicely there. I went to Madrid, which was supposed to be our last big trip before we had babies, and I got really sick out there.
To the point where we ended up having to cut the trip short and come home. She's in the shower and she feels something in her breast, and she's like, something's not right. So she goes to the doctor and they biopsy it, and it turned out to be breast cancer.
The breast cancer one was huge. That was a blow. That was just not needed. I always say that. It's just not necessary to have that happen to her.
My options for the breast cancer was a lumpectomy, a single mastectomy, or a bilateral mastectomy. And probably a week before I'd made this decision, I found out that my surrogate was pregnant with twins. I have babies on the way. This is everything that I ever wanted. I finally have it. and now you're telling me I have breast cancer?
She opted for a double mastectomy and reconstruction. That was hard, as you can imagine. Yeah, that was just maybe as weak as I've ever seen her physically.
I don't know that I would have gotten through that time without him by my side. And he just makes things easier because I know I can always lean on him.
When we heard cancer-free, it was a great feeling, great day in our family. Surgery was a huge success.
And shortly thereafter, the surrogate went into early labor. Fortunately, they were able to hold the surrogate off for 2 more weeks. And then the babies came on December 1st.
It's like nothing I've ever felt before. Like, I looked in their little faces and I was so grateful that I was here to be their mom. And that's all I wanted, was just to be their mother. And when the doctor handed me them, I was just in shock that this was actually happening and this was my life. And I just felt so lucky that I was able to do that and that I live in a time that's possible.
It made both our lives complete. Their faces light up when they see her. They go running full speed ahead into her arms. That's the best part of my day, is when I see the kids with her.
I always say my biggest goal in life is to be the longest living transplant patient. I think that's a really good goal to have. And if I am, then I get to see my kids go through everything that they dream in life.
From what we thought in the beginning, at 3 months old, here we are 35 years later. It's a miracle. It's amazing. You know.
Everything she does is amazing.
The reality of CF is it is a brutal disease that has taken far too many people from this world at far too young of an age. And cystic fibrosis affects not only the person who has it, but every single person in their life.
The reality of this disease is that it could kill her at any point. The only way to stop the threat against her and everyone else is to find a cure.
What I think is so great about the foundation and the podcast that they're doing, they're putting a lot of information out there for families and for some parents who have a newly diagnosed child, to hear these stories and to see these people going to college, working out, having a full life, having babies. I think that can only give the parents of a newly diagnosed child just so much hope for the future, that there is life with CF, right? It's not this death sentence. And I think that's really, really important.
Just by looking at her life and how she handles everything that has come to her, every curveball, every blip, every cancer, one of those takes courage. And for her to have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of them on her plate and just battle each one with such grace and ease, it takes a tremendous amount of courage. I think she's a perfect person for the award. So, yeah.
I always say I feel like we hit the lottery. And I don't know that there's a lot of people that would have my life and say, wow, I'm so lucky. But I really do feel that. I feel that I am a very lucky person with a very full life, despite everything.
There's a line in one of the Rocky movies, and he says, it's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's Marge.